Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I have a really interesting guest tonight. And once we start talking, you're going to hear he's got this deep radio voice. But this young man, local Jersey guy, um, he's a Rutgers alum. And what's kind of cool is he wrestled in the Rutgers club wrestling team. And where do you hear where he's ending up right now, which is kind of neat. But he's building a really what I call a standout career, in broadcasting, making a name for himself in journalism as well. But he's the play-by-play voice, and I'm giving it away now. He's a play-by-play voice person for the Rutgers Wrestling team in the Big Ten. And I heard some of his pieces, and I'm like, I got to get this guy on this show. He was the inaugural broadcaster for the Atlantic City Blackjacks in the Arena Football League, which had to be fun. He's been on Sirius Radio, 97.3 ESPN Radio, 247 Sports, hosted College Football Daily. I can go on, and national news desk for the writer on 3, covering college football, which has to be a ton of fun, just sitting there talking college football all day long. But from his Rutgers wrestling roots to becoming a trusted national voice, this young man has got a career path that, I mean, he's going to be stardom somewhere someday, and it's going to be really soon. But welcome to the show, Nick Kosko.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. It's cool to be among the many guests that you've had on this show, considering I know this is mostly for big-time former athletes. I know I'm a former athlete, maybe still currently training athlete, so to speak, but obviously from a different realm. So it's cool to talk to you.
Yeah, but you know what? You're working for a big-time program. Doing the play-by-play for Rutgers Wrestling. You wrestled on the club. Club wrestling is just as tough as regular. Wrestling's wrestling, right? Just because it's not a varsity sport, it's a club sport. You're still traveling, wrestling all the kids and getting your butt beat up.
Yeah, emphasis on getting my butt kicked for sure. Considering it was club wrestling in college, and there's less of an emphasis on finding your right weight class. I'll just put it that I'll just put it that way. Balancing the academic life, the social life in college, and you're having fun with your friends. It's like, oh yeah, we still have to go scrap a little bit a couple of times a week. So safe to say that I was not a true 197 pounder in college. I probably should have been about 184. But I'll tell you what, if I was wrestling for head coach Scott Goodale on the varsity team, if I was actually that good, I think he would have been said, you know what, you have to go 174 at that point.
You would have cut even lower.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I got a ton of questions to ask you. But before I sit here and grill you, just do me a quick favor. Tell the audience just a little bit about yourself so they have an idea who you are.
Yeah, for sure. 29 years old, born and raised in South Jersey near Atlantic City. Rutgers alum, graduated 2018, May of 2018 to be exact. Rutgers fan my entire life. Big thanks to my grandmother who was since passed on, but Douglas College alum. My aunt actually went to Rutgers as well. So it's been in the family a little bit. Born and bred Jersey. I was an athlete growing up, football, wrestling, soccer, baseball, kind of did it all. Wasn't great, obviously. Otherwise, I would be probably I would be talking to you in terms of maybe a different perspective as a former Division I athlete or something like that. But loved sports growing up. I always found that I wanted to have a role in sports at a certain point. When I got to an eventual career, whatever that could have been. Grew up in a household, loving mother and father, sister. My dad was a state trooper here in New Jersey.
Cool.
I was a teacher, so I figured that was going to be one of those two things was going to be my future at some point. Thought about the state police, thought about teaching. Those things were still, I guess, in the back of my head, even going through college and just right after college. Like, hey, this could be one of the backup plans if a sports media career doesn't pan out. But got into sports media. I would say full on to it in high school because I took a couple journalism classes, took some media classes, really fell in love with it more so than I kind of already was with the just the possibility of it. Wrote for my high school yearbook my senior year. Hard to believe, that was a full-fledged class in high school. So that
Yeah.
it contributed to my good grades in high school at that
Yeah.
point too. So
Yeah.
wrote for my high
Well,
school yearbook, and then eventually blossomed into trying to pursue some kind of journalism degree at whatever college I ended up at. Obviously, I wanted to go to Rutgers for the longest time. Actually, got waitlisted, funny enough, despite really good grades. But maybe like mid to I would say average SAT scores. Waitlisted to Rutgers, and I really kind of rethought my future. I was like, hey, maybe I have to go to another broadcasting journalism school like Montclair, which accepted me. I was thinking about, if I had to go there, like, do I really? At that point, Jeff, I'll, to be honest, not to get too long-winded, but that was like an eye-opening experience for me. Because I was like, if I can't go to Rutgers, I kind of don't want to pursue what I want to pursue for some
yeah.
reason. And maybe that was just me being 17, 18 years old and just being like, being a little bit more naive. But eventually got into Rutgers, obviously, after about 2 months on the wait list, and then, signed the papers. And 4 years later, I graduated with a nice little journalism degree. And then it kind of springboarded me to my sports media career in writing and broadcasting now. So currently, I write for On3, covering college football, basketball, recruiting, NIL, college wrestling, obviously, as you alluded to before. I did work for SiriusXM and 24/7 Sports in the past. So full-time On3 right now, writing, and then seasonally I'll be broadcasting high school football, basketball in the fall and the spring, or sorry, the fall and the winter. And obviously, just being this will now be my as we record this, I'm going into my 11th year already, including my student days at Rutgers, broadcasting Rutgers Wrestling as the play-by-play voice. So it's been a long-winded journey, just going from
You're only 29.
yeah, only 29, and I sum it all up, and it's like, yeah, not even 30 yet, and all of a sudden, there's probably a lot more to come, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do you find the time for all that? Like you're writing, you're broadcasting, like, how do you find time for all that?
Yeah, the good news is at least with On3, I'm able to work in shifts. It's like a normal 9 to 5 job, essentially, 8 to 4 for me, technically. I work 5 days a week. I have off on Thursdays and Fridays. Friday nights are reserved in the fall for high school football whenever we have a game. But it's a nice little balance right there. I still maintain my, athletic prowess, as I like to say. I still weight train regularly. I've been training jiu-jitsu for over 5 years. I'm a purple belt at my local gym under a former teammate of mine, actually, from high school wrestling and college wrestling. So that's nice to have, just to keep, stay active in a adjacent sport to wrestling as well, in addition to just following it religiously as a broadcaster and as a former wrestler. So that's the work social balance. My wife and I get to, kind of have that same balance as well. Whatever, she's working, she's in the middle of a career transition to becoming a teacher. Actually, she was in the media business. So it's nice. It was nice to have that connection as well. We were very similar in terms of our backgrounds, in terms of the career field. She's doing somewhere now. Maybe she actually retire one day, and maybe I have to keep working for an extra 30 years, because that's just the way the media business works. But yeah, we find time, do stuff together. Hey, either we're big homebodies. We'll take some time to go out as well. But yeah, just it's pretty much. I'm working, I'm writing. Once I'm done, I try to get whatever else I need to get done. Make sure I take care of myself personally, and we are welcoming a son in 2 months now, so that obviously that's a big
Big
life
news.
change
That's
as
big
well.
news.
Yeah, yeah, that's that was the big change over the course of this year. We got married last year, so it's definitely a big change. Trying to balance everything, but I think I've personally done a good job of managing my schedule. I think we've found a nice balance together as well, between whatever she has to do, whatever I have to do, and obviously with preparing for this huge, significant change for our family. It's been a challenge, but it certainly has been fun, and I'm sure we'll continue to evolve and move on from there. Because I just I'm glad I have a full-time job in the business, because it's easy to manage, especially working remotely. This is my home office, my home studio right here that I'm talking to you from now. So it's been a nice, really interesting balance, to say the least. But certainly, day to day, we make it worth. Well, or I should say, we make it work. So I don't try to look too far ahead. It's nice to take it day by day for sure.
Hey, you got the routine down.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I try to make sure the routine. I'm a big routine oriented guy. She makes fun of me a little bit because I'm a little too rigid. So I've had to, go back to what I used to do in high school and college, which is kind of go with the flow a little bit. I kind of changed post college a little bit, but finding that nice balance of, staying regimented, staying with a routine, but also, just taking whatever comes, whether it's, physical, mental, whatever life throws at you, and not to be too cliche, but certainly trying to adapt to that has been a challenge, but also certainly rewarding because it obviously it helps out well with pretty much everything.
Well, you said it before, go with the flow. When that baby comes, just go with the flow.
That's it. Yeah, that's I think that's it's funny. I guess it's a self joke that I've told myself. It's like I'm so regimented and routine, so so I'm actually reserving my go with the flow stage for when he comes. So if it's not happening right now, don't worry, it'll happen in about 2+ months.
That's it. That's it. So let's bounce around a little bit. You know, club wrestling.
Mm,
Can you? Some people might be saying, like, what is that? Like, can
mm,
you explain the difference from? I mean, you're doing the play-by-play for Rutgers Varsity Wrestling, which is one of the
mm.
biggest programs in the country, right? And you were there a number of years ago on the club side.
Mm.
Explain to the audience, like, what's the difference between varsity and club?
Yeah, so if you have gone to if you're a college student or a former college student, you graduated, you probably noticed there was club or intramural sports. Obviously intramural are all the sports that students can play and sign up for and be members of those certain teams, whether it's basketball, soccer, just to name a couple, just name a few. Intramural is you're playing against other students on campus, so it could be like frat house versus frat house, or for Rutgers example, it could be like there's a Bush campus team and there's a Livingston campus team for intramural basketball, right? So club is like a step above that in terms of you actually compete against, you practice with each other. They're mostly all student run, student funded. That's what we were as a club wrestling team. Most club sports are, but you do travel and you compete against other schools, so it's like what a varsity sport would do, but again, you're student funded, you're student run entirely. We practice 2-3 times a week depending upon availability on the weekends, right? And we had to fundraise, just like any normal sport in high school or even a Division I school would
Yeah.
do. You have to fundraise, but again, you have no administration backing other than, I guess, the club sport office, where they're kind of there if you need them. They're basically a
Yeah.
resource, but it was all on us. So it's a fine line, especially if you want to get involved and then you want to take a leadership role on that. It is a lot, actually. It's like, I was a student. I was a member of our student radio station as well, WRSU. So those were like my two big things. But being trying to, maintain that athletic status, so to speak, I wanted to keep wrestling, and, I wasn't great in high school, but I wanted to just keep being involved in the sport from a physical standpoint as well. So I practiced. It gave me a good workout. It was nice to, get to know some other guys that I never would have known in
Yep.
college otherwise. So they still remain some free. I still have a couple friends from the team to this day. And it was a good way to stay in shape, stay active. In addition to, just trying to work out as much as you can, right? And the fact then when competition kind of reappealed to me, which was, all right, let's enter some of these open tournaments. Let's try to compete against some other schools. So you do that, but you're also at the mercy of, okay, who's your team president, who's your team VP, treasurer, all that good stuff. They're all your peers, right? So
Yep.
eventually I became the vice president my junior year, had to deal with a little snafu towards the end of the year when I was actually on the road for something for the Big Ten tournament, actually broadcasting for WRSU. I had to take care of a little snafu ahead of the postseason for our club team. And then my senior year, I was president of the team, and then my good friend Ant was I named him our VP, and he ended up running the club the next year. And he actually, I believe, is still involved or was still involved for a few years, even after the fact, as a stipend coach. So like that they've been able to evolve, and which is good to see. It's a very interesting dynamic when you already have a Division I teams, particularly in the sport of wrestling, because there's a lot of schools that we compete against, especially when we went to the national tournament, which is actually, it was 64-man brackets, like, if you could fill out the entire thing, of course. But it just goes to show you that a club sport can still be just as big, because you have all these other schools that don't have Division I wrestling
Yep.
programs, like a lot of programs in the South, or all these Florida schools, like Central Florida, for example. Heck, USC and UCLA had club teams, and they competed in this. Like, that was their D1 team, if I put that in air quotes. So it was cool to see. It was nice that we got to, do something of our own. And it was a way where it wasn't the Division I commitment. Not saying these guys wouldn't have been committed to a Division I program, but for the guys that maybe weren't talented enough or didn't have the time to do it or just couldn't cut it at that level, this was the next best option. And it gave these guys an outlet to compete, to at least practice,
Yeah.
build the team camaraderie. So that's really what I wanted to do. I never thought I was going to be a Division I wrestler, but especially by the time I, got through about 2.5, 3 years of high school, I'm like, yeah, I'm just doing this because I love the sport. I just want, I want to stay dedicated to something. So that's kind of how I transitioned to college, where I found that my freshman year at Rutgers, and then, just blossomed from there, ended up running the team, competed a little bit, like I alluded to before, probably wrestling up a weight class or two, because everyone knows how college is. You go out, if you have that nice little academic and social balance, cutting
Yeah.
weight's really not the priority if you're not a Division I
No,
athlete.
no, no, it's not fun. I'll tell you that, cutting
No,
weight.
it's not. Haven't done it in high school. No, it's not
Mhm.
fun.
So what do you think your biggest takeaways are from, being part of that group?
I would say it was nice to put it, at first it was nice to put it on my resume because I was like, oh yeah, I ran our club wrestling team, and I think that kind of gave me not a leg up, but I would say more of an understanding of how, maybe obviously to a lesser extent, how these Division I programs operate, and namely at Rutgers, having known Coach Goodale and everybody else for so long at this point, it's like I have a pretty good understanding of how this program runs, through all facets, not just what it's like on match day or during the tournaments, right? How they have to what they have to do in the off season, the recruiting, the fundraising, especially these days, right, with NIL and everything, and the transfer portal. So it gave me a nice little understanding of how to operate a club, operate a team, coach a team. Now I'm not gonna say I'm the greatest coach in the world, but I will say, maybe just to, this is like more of a self-inflating comment right here, but I think I'm definitely a better coach in terms of wrestling, and now especially with jiu-jitsu that I've been training for quite a while now. I'm definitely a better coach and a mentor in that space than I am a competitor. And I think that's, that that probably stems back to, growing up around a teacher, like
Yeah.
my mother, where I kind of got that influence a little bit. So I think that's where it ended up teaching me a lot, then, because when I was in college, I ended up coaching early on in college. I would go back home and coach my old youth football program. Like I would just go help out voluntarily. So I think that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to the coaching side of things, more so than I would have thought previously, where I was just like, I want to be a competitor. I want to try to be better as a competitor. But away from the sports media side, I think this really gave me a better perspective on coaching, team leadership, how to operate a team in its
Yeah.
entirety from outside, like, off the mat or off the field. So it definitely gave me a lot of that, and I think just overall it was a great experience to just be around a team, because that's what I really loved in high school. Because
Yeah.
again, coming from a guy who didn't see any varsity time for football till his senior year, and then barely any for wrestling until like later junior year and throughout
Yeah.
my senior year. I was never a great varsity athlete, so I think just that team camaraderie was always something that I took away from high school sports, and it kind of bled over and transitioned into college. So I think it just
Part of it.
I think it blossomed over college,
Yeah.
is my main point for sure.
So any if you could pick something, do you have a favorite memory that like, man, yeah, this was great when this happened when you were wrestling?
When I was actually wrestling, or just any time from club wrestling?
Just any time from club wrestling.
Okay.
Any memory that stands out? Hey, this was a great team moment, individual moment, fun moment.
Um, Team moment had to have been my senior year. It was the national tournament. My teammate Javier White, he became our first ever national champion for the club team. And one thing I jokingly hang over the head of, I don't obviously I probably have never actually told uh, Goody this, or maybe I haven't, but it was, hey, we got a national champ before you guys did. It happened to be the year before National, and Suriano won their national titles the very next year in Pittsburgh. But no, I mean, obviously I was only joking, of course. But yeah, Jav was one of probably our most accomplished wrestler in club wrestling history, if I can, think about the history of the team off the top of my head. So I didn't qualify for nationals. I wrestled in the conference tournament. I happened to run into my best friend who wrestled at Rowan University. My best friend Eric, who I've known since birth. He wrestled over at Rowan. We were in the same weight class our senior year. I had to wrestle him first round of the conference tournament. I was like, all right, we're just going to screw around a little bit. All right. Before I go back into high school, so I'll tell you the team moment first. The team moment was when Jav won the national title because I was in his corner. It was great to see because the fact that I I can't coach a guy like that because I'm just like, you're too good. Like, you're just gonna the way he wrestled, it's like you're just an athletic freak. You're a really good wrestler. Just do your like basically my
Yeah.
coaching to him was like, all right, do your thing. You're far better than I am, but I'm here if you need me, essentially. But I think it was
Yeah.
just a culmination of everything coming together where we had to, under the guise of my leadership for the entire team that year, where we sent a handful of guys to nationals. We knew we had a chance to win the whole thing, and overcoming a little adversity like 2 rounds before where he almost got pinned or almost lost or almost blew his huge lead. I forget what the heck happened now at this point, but I think it was just a culmination of hard work, and I think just us having this great team chemistry. And obviously, we went out and celebrated afterwards. Me, him,
Yeah.
the entire team, which is a great celebration. And it was just like, all right, for a club team that already has a Division I team at the school, we're a guy from our team won a national title against other club teams where this is their team. Like
Yeah.
Liberty University, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with Liberty. They every year, at least when I was in college, because you're allowed 2 qualifiers per weight for
Yeah.
club nationals, and there's 11 weight classes. The 11th one is 235 pounds. You're allowed 2 qualifiers. Now Liberty would have, so you can have a maximum of 20 qualifiers. On average, anywhere between like 14 to 17 qualifiers. This team was deep. I'm just using them as an example. The University of Central Florida was another team like that where you see multiple weight classes where they had 2 guys, right? And Liberty had a couple guys that would face each other in the finals. Like their national final was like, let's say it was 149. They would have two. It was 2 Liberty guys facing each other, right? So the fact that we are a club where we practice essentially twice a week and maybe open mats on weekends, that we have a guy who can become a national champ. And then the very next year, when I went back to help a year after I graduated, we had another All-American, right? And then they eventually, I think a couple of years ago, also had a national champ once again, and he actually beat a Rutgers guy in the finals. So it's like
Yeah.
now the club is established, like you can get this done. Like you're practicing three times a week against other
Yeah.
schools that treat this like their Division I sport.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome to see. So that was a big part of it. And then as far as individual standpoint, I can name you any like big pin I had in high school, but I think it was so and I guess like the feeling of that is like the best moment, like from an individual standpoint. But a college moment that stands out individually because again, I at a certain point. I was, just going up against absolute hammers. So I'm just like, let me just try to save team points or just do the best I can. I had
Yeah.
a couple scraps, lost by points. And I'm like, could have done X, Y, and Z. But going back to what I said about my friend Eric, who I wrestled in the first round of the conference tournament, we made a pact like beforehand, like he's gonna beat me. If I beat him, it's either because he's hurt or something freaky happens, right? So like, there's no way you can't fake that. So we went up through each other before we wrestled. It was like, I guess we're wrestling each other. So we made a deal where it's like, all right, he wouldn't pin me, but like he's gonna like make me work for an escape. But like
Yeah.
he'll let me take him down. So that was kind of funny where it's like, oh my God, like I took him like never in a million years could I take him down in a wrestling
Yeah.
match, even with all
Yeah.
my even if I had like an extra 5 years of training than he did. I never in a million years could I take him down. So it was pretty funny, scrapping with him, and we wrestled a couple times in college before against each other. So it was funny. As we were laughing about him, just like all
I'm
right, you
sure
know
you
what?
guys forget
Yeah,
and talk about it now, right?
yeah, oh yeah. It's like you go win this tournament. Go place at nationals. Do whatever you got to do. Like I'm just here for the ride. So that stood out, and it was we still laugh about it today.
That's awesome. So, I mean, so you wrestling club at Rutgers and you got Goody around the corner with a
Mhm.
powerhouse program. You know, did anything rub off from him, the program, that kind of influenced your passion for broadcasting?
Not necessarily. I think getting to know him certainly. I don't think I wouldn't say influenced my broadcasting, but getting to know him, I think gave me probably a better understanding and a close. The closer we got in terms of a professional relationship, and obviously, we can BS with each other here and there as well. So, getting to know him more and more over the years, that certainly, I guess, reinforced my role as the voice of the team, so to speak. So that kind of, if you, from a national perspective, like, yeah, like I'm no, I'm quote unquote known nationally throughout college wrestling, but I'm known as like the voice of this program, and I think that's been reinforced, so especially over recent years as well. But no, I think the love for broadcasting started when I was young, because I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagle fan. So I'm, Merrill Reese, who's still broadcasting to this day,
Yeah.
probably won't ever retire. I think he'll have to, not to be morbid, but he'll probably have to pass away before he's ever replaced in that booth at this point. Talk about a dream job, broadcasting for the Eagles. But Merrill Reese was a guy that I always
Someone's
looked.
going to be after him, right? Why
What's
not
that?
you?
Yeah,
Someone's
why
got
not?
to
I'll
be.
throw my hat in the ring as long as the application's open. Why not?
Yeah.
But he was my first broadcasting influence because I don't know if you have Comcast Xfinity, but back in the day if you had Comcast on demand, I'm talking about, '05, '06, there used to be that on demand feature, which I don't even think it even exists at this point anymore, but there used to be on demand. So Xfinity or Comcast back then would have these abbreviated highlights of the NFL games from Sundays, and they would play you the highlights because, NFL Films would do it, but they would not have the TV. It'd be the TV broadcast, but it would only be the radio calls, not the TV calls. So that was my, not introduction to Merrill Reese, but my, like, just to use the word again, my reinforcement with Merrill
Yeah.
Reese, because I would hear his calls all the time of a game I just watched. And at that point, I started memorizing them. I started
Really?
memorizing certain calls from certain games when I was, 7, 8 years old. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I would love to do something like that. Or
Yeah.
just, I don't think I fully understood the concept of it yet, but I knew he was the guy broadcasting or calling the action for the Eagles. And so, when I wasn't actively playing, when I was a young kid, when I wasn't playing football or doing whatever other sport I was doing, if I was, sitting around playing, Madden, like the earlier days of Madden football on, the GameCube or the Xbox, I
Yeah.
would actually start muting the TV. I would start calling the game myself. I'm playing it so I can kind of control the action. So I'm kind of cheating
Yeah.
in a way of broadcasting, but I would start broadcasting that way. I would call out the action almost like Merrill Reese, where I'm trying to imitate Merrill Reese while I'm playing the game. So that was my first inclination that I wanted to do something like this, or I had an interest in it. And then it kind of just blossomed when I got to college, where I thought I wanted to write at first. All right, sports writing, be a column writer, like, that's awesome. Like these guys are the kings of, covering the NFL or covering the sport. Like all these guys on ESPN, like they're all writers first, right? But then of course, as I graduated high school, went into college, that's really when, not exactly when, but the medium was already starting to change at that point
Yeah.
to, you have to pivot towards radio, television. Podcasts weren't huge yet until really until COVID, but podcasts were starting to become a thing again, where, and like, people had a bigger voice because of what social media provided you, what YouTube was able to provide you, even back in, 2015, 2014, 2015, right when I started college. So that's when it kind of switched to, I love the radio. I still, I had a thing for the radio as well. But then once I joined the student radio station when I was a sophomore, I was like, oh, I want to be a host. I want to be a radio show host. And like, oh, we can do play by play. Yes, I want to do play by play. And it's like the writing thing. And ironically, as I write full time now, the writing thing kind of went out the window. And like my whole focus was on, yes, I gotta write. You gotta write no matter where you go. But my focus switched to immediately, all right, radio show host, play by play. That's what I want to do. If I can make it full time in the business, like this is what I want. Like the goal would be to do this full time. And obviously,
Yeah.
right now I write full time, which is totally fine. I enjoy my job. I love my job, and I supplement with broadcasting, obviously in season. So that's kind of more the reality of the job now. But that's when it kind of switched when I was a sophomore in college. Like I had the affinity for both of them, but then once I really got introduced to producing a radio show, to hosting a radio show, to be able to call games and starting to call, and I, first one to ever call wrestling on that station when I was only a sophomore, I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. And then obviously the rest is history.
That's so cool. So how about any mentors along the way? Obviously, the guy from the Eagles, because you heard him, but was
Mm.
anybody who's really a mentor that's been coaching you and guiding you along the way?
There's a handful. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out my guy Dave O'Sullivan, who gave me my first shot of doing anything professionally, or at least on a freelance basis. Dave is the owner and operator of Glory Days magazine down here, which has been a magazine since actually I was in high school. He started it.
Okay.
He used to be a local sports writer at the Press of Atlantic City down here, like way back when. But he started this magazine, Glory Days magazine. It was the fall of my senior year of high school, so that would be 2013. So over 10 years ago, he started it, and then my freshman year of high school, or sorry, freshman year of college, I should say. It's only a few weeks into school, and then I'm in my dorm on a Friday night. Yeah, that obviously changed. Years later, being in my dorm on Friday nights, that was not a thing a few years later, obviously. But second week of college, and my high school's playing. I could watch the game on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I was watching my alma mater at Carver Township, playing Atlantic City, and I was like, you know what? I have a Twitter account. I'm just gonna start tweeting. I'm gonna start. I have an interest. I want to cover the game, and I want to give the updates, and kind of not express how I felt about the team, but I was like, oh, let me just start covering this, see what happens. Started tweeting about the game, started tweeting out score updates, and I was just like, because at that point my Twitter account was my following was everybody I went to high school with. You know what I mean? So it's like, who's gonna follow this? Okay, let me tweet out some EHT athletic stuff and see what happens. So I started tweeting out score updates and it was a wild game. They won in overtime. I still remember that. Started tweeting out updates. And then immediately after the game, or even during the game, Dave DM'd me on Twitter, and he was like, "Hey, I would like to try you out." And I noticed he got I think he kind of figured that I was a journalist or going for journalism at Rutgers. I think I might have had something in my social media bio, or he found it somewhere on Facebook or Twitter that like I was going to Rutgers and I'm studying journalism. So he this wasn't a total shot in the dark for him, but he gave me my first shot, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to try out writing." And so he had me write some kind of college feature. As like, we started out with like doing like college features, and then it kind of ballooned from there, where I started doing high school features of like these Q&As, or like these former local athletes that are now in college. Because, again, I was in college, so it's like, okay, this girl or this dude is in played at EHT or played at Absegami, or is from the Atlantic County area or around the area, but they're playing, D3 lacrosse or field hockey, right? Let's catch up with them. That's where it kind of started and then that's how I got more into writing and being a freelance writer, and eventually started covering more high school sports for him in a written format. So he's definitely the first, I would say, professional mentor that I had, just because, he gave me my first break. Obviously my teachers from high school in media. Miss Eddie was my first. That was her maiden name. I forget what her married name is now, but she was my first. She was my first journalism teacher in high school. Mrs. Steep, she's still there at the high school right now. She's one of the journalism and media teachers still there at the high school. She was my yearbook teacher and media teacher my last 2 years of high school. So she was a big influence, and just kind of steering me in the right direction, as well as where to go with the profession. And then other professors at Rutgers, obviously Steve Miller, he's everybody's mentor, right? So, Steve Miller obviously helped me out a lot while I was in school. Mike Pavlichko, who's over at WRSU right now, still the broadcast administrator. We still talk now, ironically, about high school football, because we could talk about that for hours on the phone, right? It's good. It's good to still be in touch with Mike as far as mentors are concerned. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to leave everybody. I don't want to leave somebody out, but there are a couple more. I still conversate with this guy, Rich Quinones. He was really good to me early on when I interned at 97.3 ESPN when I was going into my senior year of college. He was a former host over there. He's an independent host now. He's done a bunch of things. He's been kind of all over the country as a radio host. One of those old school type of guys. In terms of the old school sports talk radio host. In the mold of a like a Mike and the Mad Dog type, which is nice. So he's been a mentor for me, nice colleague, good friend to me. He's really helped out. Mad Dog himself helped me out for 3 months that I was his intern my senior year. So I'll dropping the big name Chris Russo, so that was cool to have him as a mentor for 3 months, and then. Yeah, I'd say my guy Matt Ulmer right now. He's not in he's not in the business per se. He runs his own appliance service business. He just happens to he just films and streams high school sports on the sides. But it was a passion project of his. Almost 20 years ago, he brought me aboard in terms of doing the play-by-play and broadcasting these games about 6 years ago. Been with him since, doing the football and the basketball, and for for what we do, he's been very helpful, and he's definitely given me a nice outlet to certainly showcase what I can do now. And if you go back and listen to any high school football or basketball game I did 6 years ago, you'd be like, this is not the guy I'm talking to today, which is,
Yeah.
I would like to think that's part of my hard work and dedication to becoming better as a
Yeah.
broadcaster. But the fact that he's given me the platform and the outlet to do something like this, I couldn't be more thankful for him. And I'm sure, for for how much more longer we're together in terms of a partnership, whether it's the next couple of years, next 10 years, whatever the case may be, he's certainly been a huge influence on me and certainly has helped me out along the way.
It sounds like you've had an army of people to help you out.
It certainly seems like it, over the course of, working as a professional, as a writer and a broadcaster for, since 2018, May of 2018, right after I graduated. So we're going on, 7.5 years now. It seems like a lot. It's all just short spurts. It seems like when I look back in hindsight, because, working part-time at a bunch of places for 2 years and then landing the full-time job at 24/7, working there for 2 years, and then now almost going into year 4 on 3. It's been a long ride, but yeah, as you mentioned, it seems like there's been an army kind of behind me. Whether they're still behind me or or they were in the past, it's certainly I've been very thankful for the people I've met along the way. Because I mean, if I don't meet X, Y, and Z, maybe I'm not where I am today.
Yeah, you're right. So speaking of that, what kind of challenges have you faced along the way that were hurdles that like, man, I can't believe I got to deal with this, that may have maybe derailed you or maybe almost didn't get you where you are now, but and because there's some people listening and say, hey, I want to be that guy, I want to be the broadcaster. So, and it sounds like it's an easy job to do, but it's definitely not. It just sound, could you just make it sound easy? What kind of roadblocks have you faced along the way?
Yeah, it's like any other job. Just for that last part of the question, it's not it's not easy. You have to work hard. You got to do your prep work. Obviously, when you're broadcasting, got to know how to talk. Got to I still to this day I'm still working on pacing myself because there are times where I do talk too fast, and I'm sure there are moments in this podcast where I'm talking really fast to you, and you're like, "Oh my God, slow down." You know what I mean? So, or at least somebody listening.
You're on the radio right now.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this is that I just go back, this is the Jersey in me, right? I have a heavy New Jersey, New York influence in my entire family. So it's like, I'm sorry, I can't slow down. I'm not from the Midwest. You know what I mean? So, as far as hurdles, I guess I'll go back to a couple years, not a couple years ago, 5 years ago, more than 5. We'll say, we'll say almost 6 years ago now. I was working at SiriusXM part-time, so I interned there when I was a senior in college. Interned, as I mentioned before, for Chris Russo. Being with Doggy, it was unlike anything else that I've done in my career as an intern or as a professional. That was certainly a sight to see. Then I worked at SiriusXM as a board op for the play-by-play department, where I'm putting you listen to any football game or baseball game professionally on SiriusXM, where you get those local feeds, right? Like, oh, I want to listen to the Red Sox feed tonight, right? Being a Red Sox fan, wears it over my left shoulder. So, so if you listen to something like that, I'm the guy at the SiriusXM offices in New York that has to put that game on the air and make sure, we play our own SiriusXM ads and making sure the feeds are good through, the satellite airwaves, right? So, stuff like that. I was board opping for the play-by-play department. And I was also I was working as an associate producer for the Mad Dog Radio channel. So I was working the overnight show initially with Scott Wetzel, who go back to mentors and influences. He certainly gave me a lighter look at how to do a show. You're doing an overnight show. You want to make it a little bit try to make it stand out because you're talking with truck drivers all night. And people that are, maybe working, doing the graveyard shift at work, make it entertaining, make it fun. So he gave me a nice little look into that as well. He was one of the couple hosts I worked for on that overnight show. So, so going back to the hurdles 6 years ago, this is late 2019. I was kind of at a crossroads in my career where I was like, I don't know how much longer I want to do this, where I don't want to work part-time. And again, I'm probably preaching to the choir for a lot of people in this business, because this is where a lot of people do end up flaming out or just say, you know what, it's not worth it anymore. There's also, I'm sure people can relate. I'm sure that people were just like, well, come on, I faced harder challenges where I was, living out of my car and trying to make this business work. You know what I mean? So I don't disparage anybody's story. I just say this to say for these are my personal challenges where, I'm living in South Jersey. I would work part-time down here. So I would do a high school sports show for ESPN down here. I would broadcast football down here, do a college radio show on that same station down here. So that was basically my, let's just call it Thursday through Saturday. And then Sunday, I would have to drive up to New York, board op for an entire NFL Sunday, 2 games. So I'm there, essentially 11:30 to about 8 o'clock at night. And then I was living with my cousin at the time half the week, and her and her husband lived in Middlesex, New Jersey.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I was like, what am I doing here? Because I have to live in 2 different places at once. They're very gracious that they're letting me use their guest room. You know what I mean? So, and to just make my commute a little bit shorter. So, and I was going through, some personal things, with relationships, well before, obviously well before I met my wife, but it was a lot all at once. So
Lots of balance.
a lot of personal things going on with myself, just trying to, stay sane, so to speak. And then working a bunch of part-time gigs and having to commute that much. And, after an overnight shift on a Tuesday night going into a Wednesday morning, I'm driving straight home from New York all the way back down to South Jersey, maybe sleep for about an hour, go to the gym in the morning, and then eat something, sleep for about 4 hours, go to the gym again, and then kind of like that's my day off, So I was like, I don't know how much longer this is sustainable. And thank God for my parents were up because I was living at home. So I really wasn't having to spend money on rent and additional bills. So I was able to save money, but I'm like, I'm not saving enough money here. And I'm like, I was trying to pursue a couple different things at SiriusXM where like, all right, maybe I'll start trying to do updates now. Like, can I get into the update anchor department, work there part-time, pick up more shifts, or maybe parlay that into a full-time gig, or maybe if I could eventually get a full-time producer gig, but they weren't growing on trees and there was nothing full-time for me down here either in South Jersey. So I'm just like, I don't know what I want to do. So I almost chalked it up and said, I'm going to leave Sirius. I'll do the seasonal work at ESPN and I'll become a teacher.
Yeah.
I was ready to pack it in. I was thinking about the state police a little bit again at that point as well, but I was like, I'm just gonna pack it in. I can't do this anymore. And luckily, I had initially reached out to a former Rutgers guy, Sam Hellman, who again is still a friend of mine. He was running the national news desk at the time. I think, well, I should say not at the time. He still is. He's still over at 24/7 Sports. I reached out to him initially in the fall of 2019. Granted me an interview, and he said, we'd love to have you. We want to interview you first, and then I actually turned it down initially. I was like, well, let me stick it out. I want to make something that's serious. I'm in New York. I'm just in your head. You're like, I'm in New York. Like there's no better place. Like I'm at SiriusXM. Like we can make it big fast here. And I think that's the instant gratification part where it's like, we can make it big now. So like, let's just try to do this now. So that was my thought process at the time. And I was like, damn, this is not what I envisioned. And I kind of made a mistake. So I reached back out to him and he said, we're closed right now essentially for new hires. And then luckily it came back around where I initially reached out to him in I think it was September. And then by November, he reached back out to me about 2 months later and he said, hey, we do have an opening. This will be for starting in January. Let's interview you. So I interviewed with him. Interviewed with Jamie Oakes, who's now my boss over at On3. So I'm glad to still work with him. They both interviewed me, crushed it, got the job, turned in my 2 weeks, so to speak, at Sirius. And then sure enough, I was working a full-time job, a remote news desk job at 24/7 Sports, not making great money, but I was like, hey, it's a full-time salary. It's not great money, but I'm working remotely, still living at home, save some money, and I have a full-time job now. And then basically that turn of events over those 2 months kind of led me to essentially where I am now, where I'm doing the same job as I did 24/7, just at a different company, and albeit more efficiently, and of course, making more money now too. So it's that period right there where I didn't totally lose hope, but it was just like a gift. It was like a lob thrown to me. I just had to hit it out of the park, and not to get too cliche, but I did. And then essentially, that was, like I said, 5+ years ago, and here we are now.
It's a hell of a story.
I get maybe for me, for another person, it might be. So I try not to inflate my ego, where it's like, yeah, this is like the craziest story ever. But for me personally, I look at that as a defining moment as how my career has unfolded for sure.
So where did the Atlantic City Blackjacks come into play?
Yeah, I was an arena football fan. I don't know if people know arena football even to this day now, but arena football played inside, played in a hockey or
Yeah.
basketball arena, 50-yard field. You got these huge nets, small goalposts. It's pretty much all passing league for the most part. You can run the football. It's not illegal, obviously. But I was an arena football fan growing up when I was a kid. And I was a big Philadelphia Soul fan, and then when Atlantic City was granted an expansion team in 2019, they happened to, again, be in the right place at the right time. I was still working for 97.3 ESPN at the time, part time, and they said we want to use this state. Like, they were shopping their broadcast rights around. Town Square Media slash 97.3 ESPN got the rights, and they were holding interviews for the job. And the guys at the station, Town Square Media, they kind of put my name into that. They kind of put my name into it, put my name into the hat, so to speak, to interview for this. And I interviewed for it, happened to get it, and it kind of ran off from there. And I was the voice, and to this day, the only voice of that team, because the league ceased operations once again after that season. Did eventually come back, but Atlantic City didn't come back. So to this day, I was the first and only voice of the Atlantic City Blackjacks of the arena football team. It was really fun. I got to travel. Got to travel with the team. Broadcasted all their games home and away. Unfortunately, they had a 4-8 season, so no playoffs, no Arena Bowl run, unfortunately. But it was very fun. I maintained relationships with some of those players, even to this day. One of the quarterbacks, Warren Smith, I ended up broadcasting another team he was on a few years later, the Jersey Flight, up in Trenton. So I got to broadcast their home games for that year. I think it was 2021. And he actually is a coach now, he's a high school football coach. He's now the head coach at Apsagamie High School, which is over in Galloway, which is about 20 minutes from me. So,
where did he play in college?
Yeah, Maine. He was a Division I quarterback in Maine. Yeah.
That's where I went.
Oh, well, there you go. Go Black Bears.
Because I remember they had a kid who came out and was in the Arena League. Now you started mentioning it, and I think, he's from South Jersey. Like, that's that kid.
Yeah, he's from Lacey, where he coached for a long time, and now he's his first year's head coach over at Apsagamie. So it was good to maintain a relationship with him as well, so that something good came out of that. But it was a good experience. It was that first true experience of, if you're the voice of a professional organization, this is what it's like. Cool. Yeah. So, you're going to broadcast the home and away games. You're going to host the coaches show every week and get to know these players and coaches really well. They'll give you the inside scoop, so to speak.
Yeah.
You're privy to important information, but you're representing a franchise, and it was really cool. I will definitely look back at that experience pretty fondly, for sure, over the course of that summer.
Yeah. So how did you becoming the play-by-play announcer for Rutgers Wrestling come about?
Mm-hmm. So I go back to my student days at WRSU when I was in college. So WRSU for the students gives the platform for these kids to host their own radio shows, whether it's sports. I was only in the sports department. They have a news department, music department, all that stuff. So if you want to be a radio DJ or do anything with the radio related, that's the place to go and to learn the craft, especially these days where, everyone's a podcaster now.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that as a disparaging comment. Like, it's just, everyone has the ability to do it now. But if you want to learn how to do something like that, especially if you go to school, that was the perfect outlet. And especially if radio stations that are still alive and around now are pivoting to this type of format for the most part. So it's like, you better still learn how to operate a board, put somebody on the air, how to play commercials, do all that other good stuff. So great learning experience. So with the sports department, again, you have to learn how to produce shows, learn how to host, and the play-by-play is the biggest part of it. Okay. How to produce a live broadcast, and obviously how to broadcast a game, football, basketball, baseball, soccer. They pretty much did it all, right? Even lacrosse. Guess what they didn't do? They never did wrestling. Nobody knew anything about wrestling. So I pitched the idea to, again, guy I mentioned earlier, Mike Pavlichko, who's still the broadcast administrator over there. I said, hey, at the time, it was 2015. So this is December of 2015. I said, we need to do this. We need to broadcast these matches. One, I know the sport. I wrestled. I still wrestle now. I know the sport. We got to do it. Two, this is the best team in the school right now. Okay, women's soccer is really good. Football's on a downswing. Every other sport is, not saying not worth broadcasting, but every other sport is down in the dumps right now, essentially. To put just to put it on surface level, it's like This team needs more recognition from a broadcast perspective, a media perspective, needs
Yeah.
more coverage. That was my second option, or my second reason. My third reason was my sports director at the time, who was my friend Dylan. He was a senior at the time. I was only a sophomore. He also wrestled for a hot minute back when he was younger. And then I was like, okay. I was like, Mike, I have another guy on board. Dylan, he'll do it. We have two guys on board in the sport. And then the third guy, Mike Antashowitz, who's still a good friend of mine to this day. We don't, unfortunately, we don't talk too much. You know, he went the lawyer route, not the sports media route. So he is obviously swamped and very busy. But
Yep.
you know, we were great friends in college, and I was like, Mike also wrestled. He knows wrestling, and Mike ended up being my main broadcast partner for the next 2 years, my junior and senior year. So it went from we did 2 dual meets my sophomore year. And then I said, let's experiment with the NCAA tournament. It's at Madison Square Garden. We don't have to travel far. We don't have to write out the expense report for long travel for the students. Because, the students get to travel for football and basketball, which is always a big perk of being a part of WRSU. Got to go see all these Big Ten schools. But I was like, the tournament's in Madison Square Garden. Like, we're a train ride away from New York. Let's just go do it. Broadcast over the course of 3 days. Went well as we could have hoped at the time. And then Mike and I turned it up in Mike Antashowitz, and I'll just call him Antosh. Him and I turned it up a notch our junior year and eventually our senior year, where we broadcasted all the home meets, went to select road meets, did the Big Ten tournament, did NCAAs, and even my senior year, we added my guy Matt Howe, who broadcasts with me right now. He's my color analyst on Big Ten Plus. He was a year younger than us, so he took over the wrestling coverage after we graduated. But we added him to the fold in my senior year. So it blossomed from there. And then on a whim, after I was done, I was like, let me just contact the people at Our Vision who, are professionally operated, but student run, right? So it's all students doing all the production for Big Ten Plus at Rutgers. You have a couple of professionals that work there that are pros, but everybody else is a student, camera operators, production staff, most of them are students. So it's a big student run operation. But I was like, there's professionals, and they do have professional broadcasters for the most part. The most talented students in WRSU are generally the ones who are asked to be fill-ins for, let's just say, baseball. And at the time, Lou Brogno was still around, obviously, before he passed away. He was the voice of all these sports, right? So I said, let me contact the Our Vision people. Let me see what I can do. I said, hey, I'm Nick. I know I didn't work directly with you guys when I was in college, but I'm interested in doing broadcasting for like if you have openings for the wrestling broadcasts on Big Ten Plus, I feel like I could do X, Y, and Z. I was the one who started at WRSU. I wrestled before. I know the sport inside and out. Yada yada yada. Basically, my long-winded explanation of who I was, they were just like, okay, sounds good to us. And like it was no like big interview process or questionnaire.
You got
like,
the job.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we would love to throw you on with Lou because Lou was that old school standard broadcaster, but it's like he could do everything, right? He could do pretty much every sport. But he wasn't a wrestling guy, so to speak. He loved the sport, could call the sport. Did he know the ins and outs? No, he did not. Did I know the ins and outs? Yes, I did. So that's why we worked so well together when he was around. So I got the broadcast with Lou. I was the color commentator, actually. I think people forget that. And I think sometimes I actually forget that. I was the color commentator with him for a couple of years until he passed away. And then obviously once he passed away, I slid over into the play-by-play chair. And then my classmate Dom Savino, he ended up taking over Lou's role of pretty much every other sport on Big Ten Plus. So it's nice to see that someone that I graduated with also got a chance to do some of what I'm doing as well. So, and then once I slid over to the play-by-play chair, I said my first call is gonna be Matt because Mike was already long gone. Traveling around doing he went to Cambridge for his master's overseas. He came back, got a law degree, and I'm like, he's doing something completely different. Let me get Matt because he was still working with us. At the time, he was actually a colleague of mine at 24/7. As we ended up, he ended up working with me and a couple other Rutgers guys on the 24/7 desk. And then eventually he did leave the business, but he still broadcast with me. So this is like his lone connection to sports media still, which is great because I love broadcasting with him to this day. But that's kind of the path of where I went as the play-by-play broadcaster on the radio, color commentator on Big Ten Plus, eventually to play-by-play, and then I re-added last year doing radio for Rutgers Wrestling, where I did the NCAA tournament in Philadelphia on online radio on ScarletKnights.com, and I don't have anything official yet, but I will say that's probably not going to be the last time I do that outside of Big Ten Plus for Rutgers.
Yeah. So wrestling is such a fast-moving sport.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like baseball. Okay, here comes the pitch. Like
Yeah.
wrestling. Like how do you think so fast? Like how does that come out so fast to kind of play by play what's going on in wrestling? Because it's just so bang, bang, bang.
I think there's a couple of ways to do it if you're a wrestling broadcaster. Well, one, you have to know the sport.
Yeah.
You can't go in there, excuse my language, half-assed, right?
Yeah.
You can't go in there and expect to just pick up on the sport right away because you have to one, especially on a streaming platform. So if I was broadcasting on Big Ten Network, yes, it's mostly wrestling diehards watching that, but it's a broader audience where you might get casuals in there.
Sure.
And, I'm not going to go on the whole, 3 hour long debate of like, does wrestling need the casual viewer? Does it not? How do you attract the casual viewer? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
But you have to have a fine balance of where you can dumb it down enough where you make it very simple when you're
Yeah.
broadcasting wrestling to maybe the casual viewer that maybe wrestling in high school doesn't understand the intricacies anymore, or someone there is now being introduced to the sport. You have to be able to dumb it down, but you also have to have that fine balance of here is wrestling for dummies, but also here's the really intricate knowledge I have that could spring on you once in a while.
Yeah.
Generally, that's reserved for the color commentator. I've taken the approach of kind of doing both, and then letting Matt bounce off of me, right? And that's generally what a play-by-play guy does with a color commentator. You want the color guy to bounce off of you. You want to set up the color guy to explain a lot more. I do a little bit of both. And I think that's just me because I know the sport so well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's in the back of my own head that I don't want to come off as somebody who's just calling the action. I want to say X, Y, and Z, but I know why this. And
You know what's going on.
Yeah, I'm going to vividly explain this to you, why this is going on and how this is going on. So
Yeah.
I simply just don't say. I'm trying to give you an example. Like I can't just say, all right, Dylan Shawver's in on a leg. Like I'll say, oh, Dylan Shawver, Shawver goes back to that outside single. He's going to elevate it now, looking for that trip, or looking for maybe I'll say like looking for that that foot sweep. I'll try to give you more of the vivid descriptions, even though it's television. You can see what's going on, but because wrestling is such a niche sport, you're like, okay, I still need to give you descriptions of what's going on. Like if I'm calling football, I call football every Friday nights, or every Friday night. Most people know football for the most part, but you can also see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you like a radio broadcaster, like so and so gets the gets the handoff. He's going to cut outside to the left. He's across the 30. He's going to gallop across the 33. Stiff arms one man. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can see what's going on. So wrestling's more of a fine balance to me, where it's fast paced. There will be lulls because, as you've seen if you've watched wrestling, especially in folk style, where someone is riding somebody. So like if someone's accruing riding time right now, there could be a lull. The arena could be a little quieter. So you have to be able to fill that like a baseball broadcaster would, with stories or interesting information, or maybe go into a deeper explanation of what is this wrestler trying to do on top, or what does the bottom guy need to do right now? He's getting ridden out. He can't get up. What should be the first thing he has to do to get up? So I think when it gets to that point, you slow it down a little bit. But I think to keep up, because I think my style of broadcasting is I'm fast paced, which as I said before, I'm trying to work on still to this day to not be too fast paced, but also I don't want to totally eliminate that, but then I think that saps my energy.
But I
And
think in wrestling, you have to be fast paced, right?
right, I think you have to be a little bit more fast paced, and also I think the energy has to be there, right? So I look at a guy like Shane Sparks. Going back to mentors, Shane Sparks has been a great guy to me for the last 5 6 years. Like we've kept in touch here and there. We see every time we see each other at a tournament, we say hi, we chit chat. He's given me some great advice, some stern advice too, which I really do appreciate. So come from a guy that had to work really hard to where he is now, where he's the voice of Big Ten wrestling on that network, and he does other sports, like he does college football on the sideline. He does a little bit of baseball as well. So it's like, if I could be like the next Shane Sparks, but like in my own version of it, like I feel like that's where these radio broadcasters, or sorry, these sports broadcasters in general have to go towards, like the old school approach. Like the Pat Summerall approach only works so much, and I'm not going to say I don't appreciate Pat. I do appreciate Pat Summerall. I don't vividly remember Pat Summerall calling football and me watching it. Like my guys are Joe Buck, Jim Nance, Al Michaels. Like there's a big game feel to it. So and there was with Pat Summerall, but that old school approach of some role, especially with television broadcasting and television play-by-play. It's like he kept it so simple. It was great, right? But he was like the only guy who could do that at that point. And plus he had John Madden, right? John Madden was the ultimate color guy. With wrestling, and even when I do it with football, I feel like I need to give you the energy because if I'm broadcasting a match that's a blowout, an individual match is the blowout, or it's a duel that like was wrapped up by match 7, I want to give you something to be excited about to keep you watching. Like
listening,
like I want you to watch the 197 match, even though it's 2 backups. This duel is 30-0 right now because they got 6 pins. But here's why you should watch the 197 match. These guys were backups. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten this chance otherwise. And same thing goes with football, where it's like, it's a running clock in the second half. It's high school football, but like, how can I keep you watching? Oh, the JV guys are in. Same energy. Okay, they rip off a 25-yard run. Same energy as the varsity guys in the first quarter.
So, I mean, which sport do you like the most doing the play-by-play for?
So I get this question. I get this question all the time. Football right now because it's football season. But once Rutgers wrestling starts again,
it's wrestling.
It's wrestling. But it's those two. It just depends on the season and what's more active for me at that point. But it's one of those two for sure.
Yeah.
I do like baseball a little bit. I didn't get to do baseball this past spring, just scheduling conflicts. And again, I'm more of like to use a baseball analogy, I'm the guy you call out of the bullpen for baseball and for Rutgers baseball and for the early Rutgers basketball games that are on Big Ten Plus. I'm your reliever or your guy or your 6th man off the bench. You know what I mean? So
now, can you just step right in like that and just boom and go, or do you need like some major prep before you get in there?
As far as what do you mean by major prep?
Like if you're going in to do a basketball game when you haven't done one, let's say in 2 months.
Okay.
Like, is it like just like riding a bike, you jumping in and going, or you gotta get yourself ready to go, names and what's going on, get yourself juiced up on the game?
It is like riding a bike, I think, for me. I think that's a natural ability that I have, not to toot my own horn, but as somebody who I think I'm a good broadcaster. Just if I had to evaluate myself, I think I'm pretty good. I appreciate that. But like doing these other sports outside of wrestling, where I know so well, which I think wrestling is my best sport. I would like to think football is, but wrestling, if I had to step back and look at myself, I'm like, wrestling's your best sport. It's not football, it's wrestling. But I would say football's my second best sport. But as far as like a sport like baseball or basketball is a little bit easier to get back into, because I haven't done Rutgers basketball, just again based on scheduling and there's not many games on Big Ten Plus, right? So basketball I mostly do high school, which is a little bit easier because and I do those like football, which I don't recommend doing football solo, but I do football solo, which is kind of wild when you actually think, even if it's high school, kind of wild to think about. But for basketball, you could do, especially high school basketball, you could do solo. I do high school basketball solo for the most part, except for the later postseason games that we have down here in South Jersey. But that's a little bit easier to get back into because, one, the rosters are very simple. Basketball, you have short rosters. A lot of these teams play about 5 to 8 guys, right, for a high school varsity basketball team. Games are quick. They're done in an hour and a half. So I think that's the easier part of it. Making sure the names are getting down pat. I make sure I look over those notes, any interesting storylines, especially if there's not much going on. I think the preparation part is me just making sure I know the players, know the pronunciations, know a handful of stories, and at least have some background on these teams, which is why I talk to these coaches regularly. That's why I do all these high school podcasts where I do these season previews for each sport. So that basketball's pretty easy to get back into. Baseball's not. Baseball's not easy to get back into. Calling it's not bad, but getting back into the baseball mode is I noticed it a couple of years ago when I last called baseball. So this is the spring of 2024. Called a Rutgers baseball game, and I knew it was a challenge. After the first 2 innings, I'm like, oh, that was a little bit harder to get back into.
Just because it's so slow, such a slow moving.
Right, it's a vastly different pace. You're also, I almost feel like radio is easier but harder, so to speak, when it comes to baseball. With radio, you have to paint the entire picture. So like you almost can't stop talking.
Right.
You have to talk very slow and methodical so you pace yourself. TV, there's so many lulls because you could see the pitcher staying on the mound. I don't have to tell you that 1,000 times. You could see the batter getting there. So you have to really know these background stories and these the stuff that you find out in the week leading up, right? Leading up to a 3-game series. You have to make sure you do your homework for that. So I think it's helped out that The one time where I first got back into it, I was doing color actually, and I was broadcasting with my guy Dom. I let him as the play-by-play guy, which is a little bit different for baseball. The play-by-play guy tells way more of the stories, and I kind of just add that color and flair to it. I played baseball a little bit, again, middle school and a little bit in high school, but that was pretty much it. So I'm not going to give you the total film breakdown of baseball, but I can give you a little bit of flair, kind of add a little fun to a broadcast when I'm doing baseball color. Baseball play-by-play, on the other hand, I try to pace myself, and I try to rely on my color commentator to add a little bit of flair. I've broadcasted with Coach Joe Godry before, so with him a couple times. So that's helped because he gives me like the baseball coach perspective.
Yeah,
so that certainly helps. But yeah, that one was a little bit hard to get back into, especially where it's like, oh, it's the first inning, and if you ever been to Rutgers Baton Field on the Livingston campus, the press box is field level. And one time I actually did mess up a home run call where I thought it was out. Didn't see this outfielder catch it. He caught it. If I was about 20 feet higher, could have seen it, right? Yeah. But we don't like to make excuses. But that's something where it's like, pace yourself, don't guess, don't jump on everything. Like, let the action breathe, especially on TV. Yeah. It's a little bit easier that way. And if you go by that philosophy, like, you'll able to get back on that bike, so to speak, a little bit easier.
Yeah. So how, Nick, how have you evolved? Like you said before, if you went back and listened to your stuff from 10 years ago till now, it's two different people.
Yeah.
But looking at your style, has your style evolved and changed over time? And if so, was it natural, or was that something you had to work on?
A little bit of both. Like I said, I have a lot of broadcasting influences. Merrill Reese is a big one. As far as the football is concerned, I love Joe Buck. Like I've loved Joe Buck since I was a kid. If I ever got to meet him in person, just tell him what an inspiration he's been to me as a broadcaster, I would. Because I think I emulate Buck's style a little bit more nowadays, especially with football. Because again, I do football for streaming, so it's not radio, so it's basically a television show. Yeah. Those have been big influences of how I model football. Wrestling, I kind of developed on my own, just because I used what I knew with football, basketball, whatever other sport, and kind of just meshed it all together to create my own wrestling broadcasting identity. I think I've done a good job of that, especially evolving that. Like I said, the biggest things for me early on were pacing, because I went from that radio mentality into television, and I kept the radio mentality where I had to talk a mile a minute. And again, you don't want to talk a mile a minute anyway when you're on radio, but you don't need to explain every little thing that's going on. People, I like to say most people they're dumb, but they're not that dumb, right? Right. Like, you can see what's going on. I could see a ball going through the air, right? Yeah. I could see a guy coming towards the screen trying to run on this side of the field and cut down this sideline. Do I still do it a little bit? Yes, I do. I think that's just kind of blended in with my style, so to speak. But I've been able to do a better job of separating myself between television and radio, and that's really helped my evolution as a broadcaster for sure. My style, in your face, exciting. Let's not be boring here. Like, I want to grab you from the first minute you tune in. So I think the one thing I could still work on is not necessarily my excitement when it comes to, like, let's just say a broadcast open, which, these pre-recorded broadcast opens where it opens up a broadcast where I'm talking to my color commentator, I'm looking at the camera, looking over here, looking at the camera, and we have graphics and all that good stuff. That's mostly only for wrestling, because it's the full scale TV production, right? I think the thing I could work on with that is, one, pacing. I could always work on pacing, right? Pacing, but also not my excitement level, but maybe like the pitch of my voice, right? I've developed the deeper voice. I've always kind of had a deeper voice, but I think like the broadcaster deeper voice, where like that's the booming voice you want to hear on a broadcast, and there's gravitas to it, right? There's a big game or a big match feel to it when Nick's calling the match, right? Like that's what I try to achieve. It's like, okay, now I really have the viewer, I really have the listener. So I think maybe myself trying to draw you in a little bit better during a broadcast open, that'd be my main goal right now. But as far as the action is concerned, when the match is happening or when the game is happening, I think I've done a good job with the excitement level. It's just the little things that I continue to try to work on year to year.
You definitely bring the energy, man. You bring it full tilt, which is awesome. I mean, I would think from a person who's a fan, right, watching sports,
Right.
I would want an energetic announcer who's bringing the energy, bringing the detail, versus a boring guy who all right, I don't want to listen to you.
Right. And I think that comes across more for myself, probably with the high school sports, because, it's nothing against anybody else who broadcasts high school sports, but I do love broadcasting high school sports. Now, do I wish I was talking to you from an even a more decked out home office where it's like, okay, Jeff, I only have 45 minutes tonight. I have to go travel to Chicago this week. I have to call the Bears game for the NFL on Fox.
Nice.
Right. Like that would be that'd be great, right? But I love calling high school sports because there's something very unique and just community based about it. Which I'm a hometown guy. I mean, I live in the hometown I grew up in. This is where my wife and I bought our house. Like I live where I grew up essentially. So, I love the community about it. And then just going back to bringing that excitement level for high school sports, these kids are going to look back on this forever. And it's for the parents too, right? I'm not, I'm broadcasting, let's just say to a couple thousand people per week.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Not bad numbers, not great numbers in terms of this is not on Fox. This is not on FS1. Okay. It's not on CBS Sports Network. It's on YouTube, right? We have a good subscriber base at Cape Atlantic Live, where I am now. A couple thousand people watch. Okay, the community loves it, but that's the point. The community loves it. The parents love it. The kids love watching the games back because if they score an 80-yard touchdown and they have a good broadcaster calling that action, they're like, oh my God. It's the coolest thing ever.
And they're saving that too.
Right. They save it. I've seen it on these kids' social medias because we follow each other. I want to see where they go to college and whatnot. Yeah. I want to follow their careers. That's awesome. Like that to me is almost the most gratifying thing that I see is these high school kids are like, this highlight was so cool, but they don't edit it with music or they don't mute it. They leave it as is. I'm like, oh, maybe they don't do it intentionally because they think the call is so good, but maybe subconsciously they at least do it. I'm like, either way, that's pretty cool to see. Right. So when I see these other high school broadcasters or other guys that broadcast high school sports, whether they're my age, just coming out of college, or the third option would be guys that have been doing it for 40 years and I did this back when it was on AM radio in 1982. It's that's all well and good, but what do you do it for now? Do you do it for yourself or you're still doing it for the community? Because that to me is for a guy like me, I want to do it because, well, one, selfishly gives me tape, gives me reps, might lead me to a huge network job one day. Right.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is, let's just say this is where this is my calling 20 years from now, where it's maybe I'm working for, maybe I'm working for On3 20 years from now in a totally different role, but I'm higher up in the company and I'm not just writing 5 days a week. Maybe I'm writing, writing columns, doing podcasts, I'm traveling, but I still have the opportunity to broadcast high school sports because that's my day off.
Yeah.
That's the main gate. That's my main outlet for play-by-play. Okay. Then I'm going to make it the best broadcast I could possibly make it. I will treat this like my Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Some people might scoff at that. It's well, it's only high school football. Sure, but
you love it. You love it.
Yeah. This is what I love to do. And I'm not going to, if I personally can't do that for the broadcast where I'm not preparing, I'm not giving you proper energy, one, I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And two, it's not fair to the people watching. You might as well just stream the game with no commentary.
Yeah.
People are tuning in to watch the game, to watch their kid, to watch their friend's kid, or whatever the case may be. Or people that are living, it could be family members that live cross country. This is the only way they could watch their nephew or their grandson, granddaughter, whatever the case may be. You might as well do it without commentary if you're not going to give it the full-fledged effort.
Yeah. And you said community before. It's got to be so cool probably to walk through the community and have people say, "Hey, I heard you on the game the other night. Great job." That's got to be, gratifying.
Yeah, it's an ego boost for sure. So I try not to let that, inflate my head, so to speak. I know it's a catch-22 actually, because when you are in this business, like you need to have an ego if you're going to get
Yeah.
anywhere. Like you have to have a bit of an ego.
Yeah,
It's
of
like
course.
you have to know you're good at some point to say like I'm worthy of this huge job. Okay,
Yeah.
not working part time for 2 years.
Right.
Like I'm worthy of doing X, Y, and Z. So from that perspective, yeah, it's great to hear. From the other perspective, it's like, yeah, it's great to hear, but I try to like, I always try to play it down like, hey, like really appreciate it. Just love doing it. Love doing it for the kids, making sure like they
Yeah.
have like the best broadcast experience, like they're playing on Sundays.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear. And I think it's ultimately worth a little bit more to hear that from parents or people in the community. Like, for example, ironically, I broadcast a lot of these football games for my alma mater's rival. Mainly, so the school's called Mainland Regional High School, neighboring town right over. We've been mostly doing their games, especially the home game. We do all their home games the last 5 years. And it's been really cool to be ingrained in that community too, because if I go walk the halls of my alma mater, a lot of my old teachers are still there. I've broadcasted plenty of EHT sports, whether it's football or especially basketball when they made their state title run a couple of years ago. They knew, like a lot of my teachers knew that I wanted to pursue something like this, and like they think it's really awesome to see me doing it, even if it's not at, like I said, at broadcasting the NFL, the NBA, or whatever the case may be. The fact that I'm doing this as like this is basically my job, and like the fact that I could do this at right in my own backyard,
Yeah.
they think it's so cool, and like they really appreciate what I do, which is really awesome to hear, considering I've had teachers that, have wished me the best of luck. I've had teachers in the past that said like, yeah, good luck with that, but I'm sure you'll be right back to, right back here doing, or like,
Yeah.
I pursued this at one point and, but you're going to end up right back here like me. Like you're just going to flame out at one point, just the way the business is. So I've used that as motivation a little bit too, but it's also, it's very gratifying to hear that coaches, teachers, students, parents, they're just like, you do such a phenomenal job, and we really appreciate all the coverage you give the kids, and just that's what it's for. And again, changes every year, but there's always a new set of kids, so that part of it never runs out.
Yeah. I you know the name Bruce Beck, right?
Yes.
So you remember the TV, you're too young for this, but he used to be the sports commentator for Suburban Cable, TV3, when I was playing. And he used to do my high school football games.
I'll get out of here.
Yeah. And now every time I see him, he's on TV. I'm like, that's Bruce Beck. Oh my God. Do you know the name Paul Spahala?
That I don't know. I only know Bruce Beck, and again, being from South Jersey, I didn't get the New York NBC, but like it's like, oh my, like that's that's NBC's Bruce Beck. It was always really cool. So
How about the name Bob Glauber? You know the name Bob Glauber?
No.
He was a beat writer for, I think it's Newsday.
Okay.
But he was on ESPN and stuff. Well, he was my neighbor, a number of years ago.
Okay.
But I see you becoming Bruce Beck.
Hey, I would love Bruce Beck's job one day. And it's funny. It's funny you mentioned the guys that are like that you noticed in high school, and it was similar to when I was in high school, because again, I go back to that, the Twitter account that I still have to this day.
Yeah.
I had that in high school, and the guys I really loved following were the Courier Post over in West Jersey, because they ran a subset of their paper for their high school sports coverage, the Matt Pack, covered all high school wrestling. And I just thought it was so cool the way they organized their coverage. And like, it was like they were their own thing at like off the Courier Post. Like they were just high school wrestling. And because EHC hosted the Region 8 wrestling tournament, so the 8 regions in New Jersey, EHC for the longest time hosted the Region 8 wrestling tournament for over a decade, and it changed when I was in high school. So like we got to host Region 8. Now, so personally, I never qualified for Region 8. I got knocked out of District 32, so I didn't even get to wrestle in Region 8. But we set up the mats. I'm talking to all the media guys, and it's like I forget what happened, but I think I tweeted that I was present at Region 8 because like they asked the question. I was like, oh, I'm present here. Here's information that I know, like so and so, like who I think is gonna win, or this is the most intriguing bracket. And I'm in high school, like all these wrestlers in Region 8, like they're all my age, like they're all my peers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like even then I was like, ooh, this is what I think is gonna happen. Like, oh, this is like 182 this year. Like I go back to my best friend Eric, like he was in a loaded weight class our senior year, 182. Talking with there was a guy in the weight class too. This guy CJ Lafragola, who I'm still friends with now. He's a fighter now. He's a MMA fighter now, professional. Okay. He just won his last fight, but he ended up wrestling at Brown. He was a 3-time NCAA qualifier, 3-sport athlete. Ended up he got a grad transfer year at Sacred Heart. went back to football, got to play football. Then he was about to play baseball before COVID hit, obviously, so he couldn't go back to baseball. But
Yeah.
otherworldly athlete, I just think back to something like that where it's like the Matt Pat guys followed me, a high school kid, when I was still in high school, like on Twitter. I'm like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. Like now we can
Yeah.
interact, and like it like almost led me to those guys knowing who I was then, and like they certainly know who I am now in the wrestling community. And it's kind of cool to see how that came full circle, where I was so into just like that very local area coverage of wrestling. It's led me to the national stage of Division I college wrestling, and still doing
Yes.
high school wrestling as a broadcaster for Cape Atlantic Live, here and there, and seeing these local tournaments, and broadcasting the
Yeah.
state tournament at Boardwalk Hall. It's kind of neat how that came full circle as well.
Full circle.
Yeah.
So like, what advice can you give to the young up and coming kid now who is aspiring to do what you're doing, and what should they do?
Adapt. Adapt a lot. I can tell you from when I entered college, so that's what, over 10 years ago, it's vastly different. It's so
Yeah.
different. Regular newspaper coverage was still a thing. And that's
Yeah.
kind of scary to say, even just 10 plus years ago, where, not saying the local paper by me, the Press of AC, is going away, but it's changed.
Yeah.
Like
the Star Ledger's died out.
Star Ledger's no longer a print edition. It's just
Yeah.
online in conjunction with NJ.com. Like that's what it is now. The Press of AC is pretty much all digital.
Yeah.
They're trying to do more video content. I remember growing up, I would love to run outside, get the sports page from the
Yeah.
and like Jeff, I'm not even talking about like the Philadelphia Inquirer or like these big newspapers. I'm like, I want to see the sports page from the Press of Atlantic City. Like that's where I
Yeah.
grew up on.
Yeah.
So the days of just being a strict newspaper writer are gone. And the fact that the medium has changed so much, where it's all podcasts now, like traditional radio is dying. Like, yes, it's still around, but traditional radio is dying. Like local radio is pretty much going away, depending upon where you are. It's all podcast based. If you want to get into this business, television's still the way, because television's not going away. It's different, right? Because podcasts are kind of not taken away from the audience, but it gives audiences another option. And because social media is so huge, these television programs, like any regular ESPN programming or Fox Sports 1 program, whatever the case may be, again, we'll just say mostly ESPN, because that's mostly still what's watched today on a day-to-day basis for television content as far as sports are concerned. That's still consumed on social media. It has to, because that's what this next generation, my generation, I'm on the fringe of millennials at this point. And then like if you're a year younger than me, 2 years younger than me, you're, what is it, Gen Z? And now it's
Gen Z,
and now it's like Gen, and then they're going back on the top of the alphabet. It's like Gen Alpha now, or whatever the heck it is. So like these generations, they grow up with this thing in their hand, right?
Yeah.
I didn't, yes, I was in high school when I finally got an iPhone, but like I didn't grow up with that thing in my hand. Like most of these kids have an iPhone, they're like there are kids
born with it.
Yeah, they're born with it. Like I help teach the kids class over at my jiu-jitsu gym. Some of these kids have phones, not for social media, but like they have phones because they have to call their parents to come pick them up. They're 8, 9 years old, right?
Yeah.
They're waiting in the gym, call, okay, wait for the ride, come back. But they're playing their games on the phone. Everything is on this device, which can fit in your pocket. So that's the way of the world now. So you have to be able to adapt. If I just kept it simple as far as one word, you have to be able to adapt to the business. Like you have to be able to produce a podcast. Got to be able to host a podcast. Got to know how to talk. So start taking acting classes. Go to a voice coach. Public speaking. That all is still relevant, but just in a different way now. Yeah. You still have to be able to write. Because if you don't know how to write, I don't think you could totally enunciate and totally get out your thoughts from here. Because if you can't put it on paper, it's not going to come out naturally up here. You have to be able to write, because that's still a big part of television as well. Writing scripts, television scripts, long form writing is still a thing, as long as it's packaged in with other content, right? So I think being versatile and being able to adapt these days is the biggest key. But you can't go into this business, whether you luck into it or you go to school for it, you can't go into it saying, I just want to write. Or I just want to broadcast. You have to be able to do everything. And I'm not saying it wasn't like that when I started college in 2014, but it was already starting to go that way.
Yeah.
It was pretty evident that it was like already kind of there. You had to be versatile and multifaceted in this business. So, and now more so than ever.
Yeah. That's great advice. So Nick, we talked about a lot of stuff. We went back to your college days, your wrestling days, through your graduation days to your current days, and to
Mm.
the love of what you're doing. Is there anything we haven't touched on you think we should hit before we wrap it up?
I think we pretty much hit on everything. I mean, again, like I said, I don't like to consider myself with a gigantic, interesting story because I'd like to remind myself and for those who look at my, if they are interested in my story, that I grew up in a very fortunate household. I had two very loving parents who worked their tails off to get to where they are now. I lived pretty comfortably. I didn't have to deal with any debt coming out of college, which was great. And they let me, they would have let me live in that house, basically till now until they said, all
Yeah.
right, hey, you're 29 times that,
Time to go.
you saved enough money. So, I've been very, was very fortunate, to grow up in that type of household, loving sister, we had we all had a great relationship growing up and just, going through that. And so I don't have a story where it's like I had to like really, really work myself out of where I was to get where I am today. I just think if I'm in that, I'm not gonna take credit for this type of idea or theory. I want to give it to my guy Josh Pate, who now works with us over at On3 among his many other broadcast outlets. He's basically our face of college football these days. But he said something along the lines of because he worked his tail off to get to where he is now. Like he was doing local TV in Georgia and said, I'm going to take a chance because I know where this industry is going. It's going the way of YouTube and
Yeah.
podcasts. I'm going to take a chance on myself. He did. And sure enough, roughly, let's just say 6-7 years later, he's now like one of the biggest I don't even call him an influencer, biggest hosts and voices of college football, the way you consume college football content as a podcast, as a show, content, whatever the case may be. He worked himself up to that. But what he said was there are two categories, I'd say, or sorry, there are three categories of people like myself, like Josh, like others that are broadcasters, are sports content creators, or media content creators that want to make it big, okay, that have this lifelong dream of wanting to do something like this. There are three categories. The two main ones are the ones who are either luck into it or are born into it. Okay, so you look at I'll use Joe Buck as an example. Okay,
Yeah.
he was doing the NFL on Fox at like 22, right? He was calling St. Louis Cardinals games at 20, 21 years old because of his father Jack Buck, right?
Yep.
Make no bones about it. Now people can hate him for that. I could hate him for that, but he worked his tail off to get to
Yeah.
where he is now to become who I think is one of the greatest broadcasters to ever live, right? But he was very fortunate to grow up. Like he was basically born into the St. Louis Cardinals booth
Yeah.
because of Jack Buck. On the flip side, you have guys that are going to work their tail off as well, but they have no connection. Okay, they have no connection to this, but maybe they come from. It's like an athlete. You come from a bad area, and then maybe
Yeah.
someone takes a chance on you. Because like they're like, we love your story, and we want to get you out of this place, and they work their tail off just to make ends meet. They get a big break, but that big break turns into like the big break that like everyone is searching for, but they get it early on because they,
Yeah.
they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They got
Yeah.
out of a bad situation. Let's just call it like, using the athlete example, like a lot of these kids like from urban areas,
Yeah.
mostly, they have a bad home life or they have a bad group around them. I want to use football, basketball. I want to, use baseball, whatever the sport is. That's my ticket out of here.
Yep.
Right? The broadcasters have done the same thing. Those are the two main categories. My category, which I think where the vast majority of these people are, as far as play-by-play broadcasters are, we're in the middle. We didn't have to scratch and claw to make ends meet. We were given an opportunity. We have worked our tail off with that opportunity to get to where we are now.
Yep.
But where's that big break? Right? Sometimes
It's coming.
Right. So sometimes either people go, it's never coming. I'm leaving the business. Other people resign to the fact that it's never coming and they stay where they are. Could that be me? Sure. Am I going to be okay with that as I sit here with you today? To be honest with you, probably not. But long term, if this is like the peak of my profession where I'm the voice of a team, I have a full-time job at a great company, and I'm doing, quote unquote community work, broadcasting high school sports, is that the worst thing in the world? Of course not. Okay. I could be doing 1,000 different other things where to make money, to make a salary, to make a living that are 10 times worse.
Yeah.
I love what I do. So that I could be that person. Or it could be where that, as you just alluded to, the big break is coming. Who knows when it comes? It can come 5 years from now, 10, 15. Generally, these big breaks happen for people like that if they keep at it when they're in their 40s, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're in this business and you get one of those big breaks and you have one of these big cushy jobs, whether it's with a network or with a team, guess what? You're never giving it up unless you're forced out or you retire or you're no longer of this earth. You're not leaving. So I think putting myself in that, and again, I found that kind of eye opening where the middleman, you don't feel bad for the middleman, but also recognize the middleman is struggling too, or wants the same things too, and they're working just as hard. Yeah. They just might not they might not have the same connection, or they might not get that same big break right away than others. They have to wait. It's the long game, and is it fair? Maybe not, but is it what I signed up for? Yeah. So I think I've accepted that for sure, and I think that's really kept me humble at times. Am I not humble at sometimes? Absolutely. I think everybody has an ego.
Everybody's got that. Everybody got ego. You're right.
Yeah. So I think I've tried to maintain that fine balance of it where 10 years from now, if I'm doing the same thing, is it the worst thing in the world? No.
I think you're in good shape.
Yeah. I hope so. So that's where I see, 10 years from now, hopefully a big network.
Yeah.
If not, I like where I am at now.
You're good. Well, Nick, man, listen, thank you for taking the time, at night, away from your 2-month away pregnant wife to 2 months from delivery. You bring the energy, man. You bring the energy, which is great. And that's what makes you special, and that's what I caught when I heard you, I'm like, I got to get this guy on here because his energy level and your knowledge of the sports world is perfect. I love what you said
appreciate
before.
That.
You said, hey, I know when to dumb it down. I know when to pick it up, and some guys don't know that, so you're definitely going to get your break. You are going to be on a major network. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, hope so. I hope you're right, Jeff. And again, I really appreciate the time. And yeah, not a problem. Really had a blast coming on.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's the home office definitely certainly a big perk.
Without a doubt. Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you on the big screen.
I appreciate that, Jeff. And yeah, wrestling season right around the corner. So if you're watching on Big Ten Plus or if you're in the building, feel free to give a little shout out or say hi. I'll certainly be welcome to come shake your hand in the arena. But yeah, right around the corner. So we're kicking into high gear now in the middle of football and the fact that wrestling's right around the corner.
I'll see you at the Jersey Mike's Arena.
That's right. Can't wait.